All right, hello, hello. We are on I think we're going to call it the Second Leap podcast. I picked that name because the people that are going to be on this podcast made like a leap of faith, joining a religious or sacred community. But the people on here are going to be kind of choosing a second leap of faith, kind of picking themselves, listening to themselves, and doing something that they've never done before, and really choose themselves um, over other people. And I got this guy on the podcast. Here we have Tyler. And Tyler was someone that I knew from Bible college. And I just knew that he was different than other people. And I knew he ran with a certain crowd. And I knew that he was Lutheran at a Southern Baptist school. And I think this is an awesome place to kind of hear his story. We weren't too good of friends. We knew each other, but I think it'd be a great place to kind of hear your perspective going through Bible college. So, dude, how are you?
My man Lakai, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm glad to set this up.
Yeah, I was so excited when you hit me up, man. I'm glad you're doing this, man. It's really needed, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel disconnected after having that kind of shared experience. So I'm just like, hey, let's try to connect and tell tell some stories.
Totally, man.
Yeah, but really, I want to start with where you're from.
I'm from Florence, South Carolina. I lived here all my life and moved back after school. So,
Okay, sweet. And did you go to Southeastern right after high school?
yeah, directly after.
Okay, so that's exactly what I did. I found it online. I saw how cheap it was, and I'd try to get that Southern Baptist discount for half tuition. And I was like, all right, let's do it. Now, you didn't go that route?
Actually, I did. I was a closeted Lutheran for a long time, man.
Oh, okay.
So actually, I was raised in a Southern Baptist church and was already beginning to question some of the tenets of the Baptist faith. And I was gonna go the Presbyterian route until I was exposed to Lutheranism, which was actually in college.
Okay.
And then I was really quiet for a long time. I never actually officially joined a Lutheran church until after I graduated, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you just ran with a certain crowd, and they were like the Lutheran crew.
That's right.
And I was like, there's like 3-4 people out of like, all of undergrad. And I was like, why did they decide to go that route?
Right.
So it's really interesting having like a minority and a minority.
Right.
And how you guys were living. But I always like to ask this question to people. Did you have a plan B, like before you were signing up and registering? Did you have like, man, if this didn't work out, I'm gonna just try to do this?
No, actually, because seminary really wasn't the route that I wanted to take in the first place. Seminary was kind of like one of the things that I wanted to do. Really what happened was I wanted to get a bachelor's in theology, but I really wanted to get involved in a hardcore music scene or go somewhere where there was like a real music scene. And Raleigh has one of the most, especially at the time, one of the most thriving, like up and coming music scenes, particularly for like heavy music. And so I was like, well, I can just go be a part of this music scene and get a college degree. My parents will like support me more this route. That way I'm still going to school. And so that was kind of my whole thing, was like, I had a point in my life where I decided I wanted to know more about the scripture and about church history and things like that. But I could also go do what I really wanted to do and still kind of appease my parents and appease some of my interest, in theology.
Yeah. Okay. Now, were your parents religious? Like, did you grow up that way?
I grew up in a Southern Baptist home. My mom was like heavily involved in church. We were kind of there from the time before the doors would open, and then we would stay and talk in the parking lot until forever.
Okay.
So it was one of those situations. My dad works crazy shift hours, like graveyard shift. Really, I can't even really count on two hands how many times I've ever been to church with my dad. But really, mom was more of the influence in terms of faith.
Okay. All right, dude. So, all right. And what year did you show up?
2013, fall of
Okay.
2013.
Okay. So you came right after me because I came in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
All right, dude. So what I remember showing up, uh, we had orientation and we like did like service projects, and I got to meet other people, and we're talking like there was the vibe was like it'd be me and like six other people, and we would just talk about testimonies, and we would talk about sin that we were struggling with. And I was like, I didn't have a church background, so I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. Like, all right, I mean, I guess I'll share. And it was just very frankly like too on the nose with our problems.
Yeah.
And it was okay at first, but then later it just kept developing, and it was like, dude, I'm just really struggling with, dude, just lust. I'm like, you know, we're 19, like it's and we talked off air just about, you know, all the guys had to go to a chapel service where one of the administration kind of talked about his history with pornography. And at Southeastern, we all signed a covenant that we would not watch porn or drink or, you know, I think at some point like use tobacco products.
Yep.
And was this a big culture shock for you? Like, say with me?
No, I always thought that the alcohol and tobacco thing was silly. But the culture shock really is the fact that you're sitting next to people you've never met in your life, and they're telling you about how, you know, they struggle with pornography. I mean, that's just a strange thing. I think that like in evangelical culture, like women are expected to be really modest, but apparently like transparency is also a value.
Yeah.
And so it's like weird how like it's sort of this is something I'm sure we'll end up talking about at some point, but it's like everything is so emotionally taxing. And so from orientation, you're already exhausted. Not only have you not only have you moved to a new place, in my case, and in your case too, you moved to a new state.
Yeah.
You're dealing with people you've never seen in your life before, which is strange. You're in college, so you're like kind of in that weird intermediate stage between like you're a child, but you're also an adult. It's weird. For a lot of us, it was the first time we had ever really like spent time away from home. But then you got like someone standing right beside you or sitting next beside you telling you that like, hey, like, let me tell you about my deepest, darkest secrets. And you're like, I don't think I've like cultivated that kind of like friendship with you yet for you saying things like that to me, you know?
Yeah. So, but one of my favorite memories that I talked to with my friend Ben. So I went to a church and we had small group, and our small group had like probably like 8 of the undergrads who came in that year. So it was me, the friends I made from orientation, and we all decided to go to the same church, and we all ended up in the same small group. So we just show up, and one day I just told my group, I was like, hey, um, I kind of struggle with porn. That's my background. That's part of my testimony, whatever. And one of the guys, he's like 40 years old, Tyler. He looks at me and he's like, what are you watching? I was like, you know, stuff. He's like, you know, but what kind? Like what categories? And it's me and like I don't know, like 10 other people. And this guy's like 40, and he's like, okay. And I told him, and he was like, okay, but how long are you doing it?
What? He wants to know how long your session is. The next question, like, so do you light a candle? Do you light a candle? Do you try to get the mood right? Oh, that's so weird.
And it's me, and it's a circle of chairs in a trailer. And I was like, if my parents knew that I came up here and I'm just like telling this to some 40-year-old.
Right.
And I was like, dude, this is like, and I mean, after that, I was like, I stopped talking to him. I was like, I'll talk to anybody else, just not him. I was like, that freaked me out.
That's insane.
But that was one of the, just me kind of acclimating to that culture at school, where that would just be the norm. I'd be like, oh, what'd you tell him? I'd be like, like, that isn't weird to you guys or whatever. But I just, what I remember from you is that you always kind of went on your own beat. You kind of did your own thing. You were actually unique. You actually had a perspective. And I just want to know, like, what actually was it like for you? Because one thing when you notice, like, everybody else is kind of like, I would just consider a weirdo. But you look at someone like, dude, I think he's normal. Like, I think he's an okay guy. And just, so what was it like just being at seminary?
Well, I appreciate that, man. So, honestly, like I know a lot of people have terrible horror stories, and like I could definitely delve into some strange things, but my whole thing really is just like I guess that's just the way I'm natured, just to kind of do my own thing. And so it wasn't like different. It wasn't really any different being in seminary and being like a Christian in high school. Like you just kind of feel like at one point in my life, I was like a Christian in high school. I was trying to live by a certain code.
Mm-hmm.
And then with school where they're living by the code that you say that you're like, that you're trying to live by or whatever. And then the strangest thing to me was that it just seemed like people didn't really take like the religion itself seriously, but it was more of like the culture of how everything was, how like it was just the whole culture of everything was the thing that I guess shocked me the most. Like it, little like red flags would happen every now and again, but I mean like even the most minute thing, like I remember the last night of orientation, so I guess this would have been like the Sunday before classes started.
Yeah.
I walk outside and I walk down the street, and there are two people who had just met each other during orientation laying in the street together looking up at the stars. And I'm like, what? Like, what are we doing here? And that kind of hit me. It kind of hit me in that moment. A whole week of just weird nonsense of orientation. It all hits me in one moment. Oh, these are children. These are children who never like had to ask any hard questions in their life. They've never been away from their parents. The furthest they've ever been from their house was probably a mission trip.
Yeah.
And now that they're away from mommy and daddy, they can go lay in the street with some boy they just met, 5 days ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because I mean, part of the uniqueness was going to a place like this was I didn't even know, but how many of our like school class was homeschooled?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Because that's, I mean, everyone I talked to, like, there's a big chunk were homeschooled, and not to shit on homeschoolers, but it was like it was a whole package of you were homeschooled, you had usually like their father was a pastor or their grandfather, and it was like this whole set. And typically the people that I talked to, they had some link in the SBC and they got like a tuition cut going to Southeastern.
Right.
So a lot of times they didn't want to necessarily be there, but it was like free school. So how can I not? And then they end up here, and then they're in this bubble, and you end up, laying in the street with this boy, and you're like, okay.
That couple, by the way, broke up like 3 months after that.
And golly,
I guess it wasn't God's will.
God, dude. I mean, look, man, that MRS degree that people swore by.
Yeah, man.
God, but
I'm glad that I didn't go that route. Like I used to think that like I'll probably end up getting married real early and stuff too. But man, I'm glad it didn't happen that way. I'm so glad.
Yeah, I'm curious if people who did go that way, where they're at now, what they're thinking now.
Well, the majority of the people, and not no shade to anybody who gets married, that's great, whatever. But like the majority of people that I know, I would say, 90, almost like 98% of the people that I hung out with are married now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you notice a weird situation just between like boys and girls on campus?
Oh man. I actually, I was fortunate enough to become friends with a lot of different females at school, and they were some of the coolest, realest friendships, because I'm the kind of person that I'm really concerned with just like speaking your mind, and I feel like that makes life just so much easier if you just speak your mind. So my whole thing was all of our friendships with like women were really like open and cool. no weird tension stuff. But the weird thing was what would happen over time is like I said, I'm not going to name any names, but
Yeah.
I had one really, really close friend my freshman year. And I mean, we just had like a normal friendship, nothing romantic, whatever. Her mom came and visited for like a weekend and basically told her daughter, my friend, if Tyler's not going to date you, then you have to cut off contact with him. So I'm sitting in class one day, like that next Monday, and I get a text message like, hey, we have to have a very serious talk. And so my heart like sunk to my stomach. And then I'm like, can we like just text about it now? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know what it was going. I mean, this was like one of my closest friends at the time. Anyway, and she hit me up and she's like, look, I don't feel right about us being friends if we're not going to date.
Oh God.
So,
And,
I mean,
yeah. And that's so, I especially remember my freshman, sophomore year, that was so normal. Like you had to state your intentions within like 4 days. You better say what you're here for. I'm not here to waste anyone's time. And that was told for me, not only like chapel service, but also like, like Sunday school, small group. It was like a whole, there's 18-year-old boys and 18-year-old girls. And it's just like, how are we, you got to like play the game.
right.
And
Right.
I thought, because I didn't grow up in a religious household, I thought that was the holy, godly thing to do. And so I was like, okay. And I felt like this big Gentile. I was like, I just want to like hang out and just feel you. I mean, just see what's up. And that was a big no-no. It's like, dude, you can't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you notice any other weird red flags on campus?
Oh my goodness gracious, man. I mean, I think above all, the group think mentality was what killed me, man. Because so I was actually fortunate. I know a lot of people who they probably got some sort of like I don't even remember the names of these degrees right now. I know I have a bachelor's in theology, but if you didn't go the philosophy route, if you didn't go the theology route, then you ended up doing some sort of degree where the only things that you really read outside of your Hoy classes were materials that were written by Southern Baptists. And then you had teachers who would just kind of go up there and all parrot the same thing. And so the students who are actually going on the front lines for the SBC are people that have never had to question any of the material that they're teaching. But the ones like you and I who have to take theology classes and philosophy classes, we're the ones that end up jaded because we actually read the source material.
Oh, yeah.
So really the group think, I mean, and the thing is like, it wasn't even really from the staff because a lot of my professors were actually really cool. And if you got them in a room and you just talk to them one-on-one, they'd be like, hey, like, all right, this is kind of how we really feel about this.
Yeah.
Or they'll, if they were going to parrot the status quo, if you want to call it that, they would at least nuance it in a way that was like, oh, that was interesting. And then you go back and talk to your friends and be like, oh, it's kind of weird. Can you believe he said this,
Yeah. Yeah. I used to tell my friends, I used to call it the initiated and the uninitiated.
Yeah.
I was like, the initiated, you show up, everyone's all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and what's the Lord going to do with me and my calling and my purpose? And then you take these history of ideas classes, these philosophy classes, and you start applying critical thinking. Because, dude, I mean, those classes, dude, if you, I remember I was, my first class was called Faith and Reason, and I had this big chunk Plato book, complete works of Plato. And our professor's like, look, you're in college, here you go. And it'd be like the first week we had to read 60 pages. Tyler, when I say that there were girls in there crying because they never read a book before, they never read in high school. And I'm looking up, I'm looking up every fourth word in the dictionary. What does epistemic mean?
Right.
What is it? A priori? Like, I don't know what it means. And yeah, so it was just like,
dude, there was a girl in my I think maybe History of Ideas 1 class, so freshman year, who told the professor she didn't do the reading assignment because it was getting in the way of her quiet time.
Yeah.
That was someone who was there for an MRS degree, not an education.
And it's so, because my thing, Tyler, was I don't know what's true culturally, like in these kind of like things, like do I study enough for my quiet time? I missed it, or they would tell us, if our spiritual life was crumbling, like it's okay to make a B or a C in class.
Mm.
Like a lot of professors told me that. I was just like, don't get an A and then lose your like faith in the Lord.
Yeah, but then they put you on like that really heavy weighted scale.
Yeah. Or I get a test, and the whole test is, did you read? Yes or no?
Mm.
And if you say no, if I miss 2 pages, and
You
and it's
lying
like
like hell.
and dude, if you lie on a test, you'll lie to your wife. And that's what they told me. And so I'm
Yeah,
like, there's so much like crossing hairs and just anxiety
yeah.
with approach to class and spirituality. And so if you get jaded, all of a sudden all your friends or whoever are just like, Tyler, I feel like something's up. But if you're
Mm.
just like, dude, I'm just tired, like
Mm.
I just don't even know,
Yeah,
you kind of have to be quiet about that kind of stuff.
yeah. You do, or you say it to your friends, and then they start to be skeptical of you. Um, but the good thing for me was I actually had a few guys I could always go to because they were in the same boat, man.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the same boat. That's really what kept me alive there, I think.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, the whole point of this kind of project is thinking back. I was like, that time was so crazy,
Yeah.
of just the existential like angst and the spirituality about it. And I'm thinking there are a lot of people who came with baggage, or like, hey,
Sure.
I'm here, but I'm trying to win my family to the Lord. And
Yeah.
now I'm trying to deal with all this BS. And some guys ask me how long I'm jerking off. And I'm trying to go to all the segmented things, like, okay, I gotta go to class, I gotta go to chapel, I gotta go to church, I gotta go to D group, I gotta go to small group, I have to lead a Bible study. And I'm like, I don't know how you don't get spiritually exhausted.
No, there's no way that you can't. And they pretend like and not to talk like too negatively, but they pretend like all you have to do is get plugged into a local church and that's going to save you from the burnout. But the reality is that plugging into that local church will burn you out more. And so
Yes.
you never get to acquire the spiritual feeling that you had in the beginning. So your entire time in seminary, you're trying to go back to that innocence with the knowledge that you now have.
Yeah.
You're being gaslit the entire time,
Ooh.
thinking that you're like it's you that's the problem. And in reality, I mean, let's be real, us at 18, 19, to 22, like there were things about me that needed to change.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. But the difference is that in a normal college setting, you can kind of express some of those failures without fear of like, hey, I might get kicked out, you know?
Yeah. And they'll keep that tuition.
Oh, sure,
So
sure,
that's it. So it's
sure.
so interesting. Looking back, I also think it's like, if you got an undergrad in at our school, and this kind of school, I just also feel like you also got a degree in like bullshit and manipulation.
Mm.
Because like you said, with gaslighting, this was like, I feel like I have such a better ear for honesty and sincerity.
Oh man.
Someone trying to pull me, or like, hey, can we meet up for lunch, or can we just talk about, and there's such a use of language that goes on.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories or notice any kind of situation
Oh,
like that?
that's a great question. It really is the language of everything. One of the things that we used to pick apart was how much the word intentional or intentionally or intentionality was used. So
Yeah.
it's not good enough, Lakai. It's not good enough for you to do something that's good. You have to do it intentionally, whatever the heck that means. And you have to do it with the purity of heart, knowing that you did it for your neighbor and you did it for God. So now it's like you not only are doing like trying to like go out of your comfort zone to do something decent for somebody, you now have to add all of this emotional and spiritual baggage onto it before you can even make a decision on like if you're going to help somebody out, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's like all this, like, in this actually, and this is what kind of caused me to, like, begin to question not just being Baptist, because I was already doing that going in, but just, I guess, evangelical Christianity is all this, like, inward looking,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yep.
all this, but all of it, I'm not looking inward to the good things about me that I actually want, that actually might make me flourish and make others around me flourish. I'm looking at the things that I believe are bad about myself. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't intentionally love my neighbor. Also, speaking of language, you know what the biggest thing is?
What?
Southern Baptists, the Great Commission is the gospel. The message of Christ to these people is go tell the message of Christ.
Ooh.
It's not ultimately about forgiveness. It's not ultimately about reconciliation to God and your neighbor. It's mostly about, hey, we're here to recruit you to be an army, to be a soldier for the Lord. And because everyone's going to burn in hell eternally, it's on you. I mean, there was that. What was that book that was written, Every Square Inch or whatever? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we got to go cover the earth with this message. That was the gospel to these people. It's not ultimately about the forgiveness of sins, or human flourishing or anything. It's ultimately about, hey, you're enlisting.
Yeah. And I think towards my sophomore, junior year, I really started to isolate on that idea because at the time they were introducing this new class. I think they got like a grant or something to do. It was like calling and vocation with
Mm,
two new professors. And I got in and it was like 7 of us. And we got these like brand new books and all this. And what I remember from that class, it was like a history of like doctrine of work, which was super cool. Like I like the idea, but the professors introduced us of like, hey, what if the gospel is, Christ reconciling all things and not
mhm.
exactly like our souls per se.
Yeah.
And of course, all the hands went up of like, whoa, what do you mean? And because it took energy and like the engine away from, say, the Great Commission, and it really made you consider about what was going on in your life
Yep.
and your talents, and all of a sudden you're considering what you have to bring. And
Mm,
so it was a paradigm shift. But what I remember about that class, and it was so heartbreaking to see, was there was a girl in our class and she raised her hand and she was like, wait a second, I came to this school because I believed that this was like the more righteous, more holy way than going to a secular school.
yeah.
And she had a 100% track scholarship at a, like, I think it was like a D2 school.
Mm,
And she was like, no, I was good. And I was looked at, and then I said no to come here to this, godforsaken place. And she had tears in her eyes saying like, do you mean that it would have been fine for
mm,
me to go? And we all kind of just sat kind of stoic, like, yeah,
mm.
yes, I guess so. And that's when I was like, all right, there's like battling narratives
Yeah.
going on. And I'm seeing that this particular kind of work and reconciling is a minority view in this kind of circle. Like they're
Exactly.
not trying to hear that.
Exactly.
And you run into these kind of derivative kind of problems.
Hmm.
And dude, I mean, it was like 2 a.m. talks with my roommates. I'm just like, yo, what are we doing? Should we leave? Should we, what does this mean for us? Because we're
Right.
all getting ministry, philosophy, theology degrees. Should we just, leave and kind of, again, like look inward and be like, I like music, or I think I like writing, or like, should I do something with that? So it was a big, really a heartbreak for a lot of people. And then it was just, I don't think people were ready for that kind of message because they gave up too much already.
Mm.
Like my theology can't change because I've already sacrificed.
Yeah.
And that was something like I never wanted to be in that place where I refused to change my mind again with new evidence.
Right. Do you think that that's the case of these lifelong career Baptists though?
I think it's so hard. And because I mean, towards me leaving school, I was like, they're not gonna tell, even if they were trying to, they wanted to be intellectually honest with me. They would never outwardly say it. They can't say it.
That's right.
And I think, I mean, it's just like, with creeds they sign, and I think like the Baptist Faith and Message or whatever, or if you want to say something outside of that, or at least a nuance, or I appreciate what this denomination does with this kind of problem, it's just, if you're not all for it and patriotic about it, it's now you're looked with suspicion.
Right.
Like, oh, yo,
Kierkegaard has this quote where it's like something along the lines of like, you can never really trust a pastor to be completely honest with you, especially if he has children, because his entire well-being is based on whether or not he can sort of like continue to hold to the same doctrines.
yeah. And I like, after that class and subsequent classes, I was like, I just knew that I couldn't be a pastor, be a missionary. I couldn't do ministry or maybe even teach, just because what if I changed my mind?
Sure.
And I didn't understand until later that, especially after school, looking back, I was like, it's a strength to change your mind.
Oh, totally.
And for this crew, that these people are like, this community, I was like, that is a weakness. You can never change your mind. Like, you have to stand to the testament of faith. And it just gets really muddy with, throwing scripture in there. And maybe it means this, maybe it means that. And yeah, so the people
But
that
the,
I,
this is the same culture that perpetuates this idea that you constantly have to be growing. But what does growth look like if you're not allowed to change your mind?
not only change your mind, but I'm like, how many people say, even in like church history, leave the faith, but guess what? They come back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the guy I respect, which
Yeah.
is like, hey, I'm just gonna, I think, Anglicans are doing it right. I'm gonna go this way.
Mm-hmm.
And if I come back, I come back.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's wrong with that? And dude, you are anathema,
Yeah.
to consider to leave, to use our resources
Right.
and, jump ship or that kind of thing. So it was just, it's hard to, I don't know. I just always saw it as bad faith.
I was best friends with a girl, super cool girl, whose dad is very high up in the ranks at Southeastern, and I guess one way or another, she had kind of told him that I was considering becoming a Lutheran at some point. And right after she told him, he subtweeted me. I'm assuming, I'm assuming he subtweeted me because right after she told him, he made a tweet about, if you change denominations after getting a Southern Baptist education, then you should pay back. You should pay back every penny that you took from the discount.
Yeah, that's goofy.
Yeah.
I was like, that's just, but it was actions like that, thoughts like that, just always made me just reconsider being in that kind of place.
Right.
Because I mean, again, I'm looking at, even like, I'll just go on Instagram and I look at my friends who went to other schools. I'm like, what are they doing? I'm like, they're in tuxedos, they're in formals, they're in Spain. I was like, they're living it, they're falling in love. And here
Yeah.
I am. Like, I'm like, okay, what is pure and what is impure? Are those just not good categories to use? Even if I believe this minority view, I'm in this majority pool. And then even still, I'm on scholarship.
Yeah.
The idea is that I'm going to eventually be a leader of these people in some capacity.
That's right.
And I was like, this is a shit show.
Your friend, like on the weekends at Southeastern were so lonely, by the way. But,
yeah.
I mean, especially if everyone went home,
God,
But
yeah.
you're looking at your friends on Instagram, you're looking at their page, and they're like really living their youth out, and we're sitting there like contemplating the forms, which has its it has its time and place, but like you don't want that to be your entire existence, man. Not when you're a kid.
Well, I mean, think back, Tyler, to second year, first year, and how seriously you took like the forms, like a certain niche doctrine. and
Yeah.
you're sitting with your friends, and we're going to talk about this for 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dude, it's 2 a.m. It's like, no, we're just getting to the heart of it.
Yeah.
And then, but you move on, and you're like, no, there's more to life. And then for people, like, this is their life.
Right.
And to me, I'm like, you only get that in this kind of bubble. People only value these things or drop crazy. You always have to have a library.
Well, what it is that men in particular that can't compete in the real world will find an environment like this where they can thrive, because there's a group of people that really, really care. And I'm not saying like philosophy is obviously important, theology is obviously important. All these things are very important, and still, I mean, then they always will be. But I'm just saying that a lot of times people who can't thrive well in the world and can't compete will go to an environment like this where they can.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I used to be in band and choir like in high school, and I remember that like in middle school, or early high school, it's the guy with like the silver trumpet, and he
Yeah.
would like shine it, and this was his life. This was he had no social life, like nothing. Like it all comes down to this, and they're always assholes. They were always stuck up, and you couldn't talk to them, and you couldn't give them a compliment because it goes straight to their ego. And it's interesting seeing the parallels there of I don't know, reading Calvin or some reformer,
Right.
and it's like, dude, you're like, the ultimate savior. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I know of many times where people would have stayed up and debated Calvinism and Arminianism, and stuff like that. So,
God. But Tyler, I think one thing we kind of talked about off air
yeah,
is leaving Southeastern, leaving this kind of community, and kind of part of the podcast is like, once you leave and all that's gone, and you're just like, all right, how much of this is useful? How much of this is not useful? You kind
right,
of have to make a second leap and think back
right.
and kind of try to be your whole self after
Mm,
something like this. And
yeah,
something that I'm kind of going through is really deconstructing my ego, um, with kind of what I want to do, my different kind of projects, what is play for me. Um, but I want to ask you, have you seen kind of ego show up for you, and kind of how has it developed through Southeastern?
mm,
But also, it's just like, it's such a playground for ego, um, at Bible college. And so I'm like, there are things that I'm trying to get rid of, and I'm just like, oh, this is like an ego thing. And I'm like,
mm.
oh, but is it? I'm like, I don't know.
Huh? That's a good question, man. If I could think about it, I could give you a really good answer. But off the dome, um, as far as my ego goes, I think I was really, really, really hard on myself in school. Um, and then what happened was, is around a culture that's really hard on me, and so over time, I just start to live like a slob and let myself go in terms of integrity, in terms of diet, in terms of just normal healthiness, right? And after I graduated, I was kind of like left with, I had come in with this solid faith. I thought I knew exactly what I believed. And then that faith was not shattered, but was deconstructed to a point, because I had realized, oh, well, you can look back and realize, these church fathers didn't always agree. This Baptist faith is still kind of relatively new in terms of the world's history. I don't necessarily need to take the Bible completely literally. And so these were things that just over the years, there was no dramatic, oh, my faith is shattered. But there were just things of like, never that my faith was completely taken, but that it was just sort of changed, and it just sort of transformed and looks different now. And I think that like people's ego and faith have like a big thing to do with one another when it comes to your own personal piety. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who go to Southeastern, their identity is not wrapped up in Christ or the Middle Eastern man that once lived, and some believe still do. Uh, Instead, their ego is wrapped up in how pious they can be about this message. And
Yes.
so for me, my piousness has completely died. In the sense that like I have no real, I mean, when you're told every single day that your entire point of being is so that you can go spread a message, you're just kind of like, I just kind of want to stay at home and hang out. Like, what are you talking about? Like, is there something wrong with like enjoying normal things in and of themselves, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like a big part of my ego shattering was I came from a home where I didn't feel that great about myself, but I was confident in who I was, but I was still like inwardly like cynical and always questioning myself. I'm still like that, but now I have like a lot more patience with who I am. So really for me, I think that like being at Southeastern did, I mean, I sound like a total jackass because I'm like, oh, I'm not as cocky as I used to be because I still, you know, it's like the whole humility and how I achieved it thing.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just like I'm just not as much of a pious jerk as I was. Like you and I have disagreements, and I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you why you're wrong. You know, I'm not going to try and convince. I'm not going to try and convince you why you should be a Christian. You're not going to sit there and try and convince me why I shouldn't be. We're both in sort of like a good coexisting part in our life where we're like, hey, you know what? Our minds changed drastically from when we were 18, 19. I'm 25, you're 27. Who's to say in 5 years what we'll think, you know?
Yeah. 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 Okay. No, I really appreciate that answer. Thank you. Um, when I think back to being in class, you know, maybe you can agree with this, but there's a part of me, I'm like, if I didn't make the decision to leave, there's a part of me that would still be in that world, that would still
Mm,
be fearful of changing my mind.
wow.
That would, like, I just don't have the courage to go my own way, given that we've just given so much.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever been in that place of just like I'm kind of scared to like be on my own or do my own thing, but would you, for people who are listening who are still in that spot,
Yeah.
do you think there's like a good message or something to give to them?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, there are definitely things that I'm afraid of, even still afraid of, uh, you know, questioning or whatever. But I think if you're coming at it from somebody who's like fresh out of school and you still have somewhat of like a Christian worldview, I would suggest that uh, that God is much more merciful than we could ever imagine, and that He's not intimidated in the least bit by our questioning. And He's also not intimidated by us being stale and useless because He tends to do great things with useless people. So from like a Christian point of view, I would say if you're afraid of questioning things, it's probably because you don't have good friends. So you should
Mm,
probably find some friends you could talk to honestly, whether they're Christian or not, who you can speak honestly with. And then in terms of just uh, not necessarily from like a Christian perspective, just a life perspective, this is kind of part of the journey of growing up is coming to a place where you realize, hey, not everything that I believe in now. It's sort of like realizing that your parents aren't perfect, and you just kind of have to pick up from where they left off and keep it moving. And the problem is that I think that like as introspective as because most of the people that go to Southeastern are either brain dead or really introspective.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
to the people who are really introspective, because the brain dead people are just going to go with the crowd, but the people that are really introspective and really seriously considering maybe not being a Christian anymore or questioning like their certain denomination or whatever, I think it really all has to do with like, do you believe that you yourself can actually like be the hero of your own story? Because
Mm,
nobody's coming to save you, man. Nobody's. This is the thing. Now, salvifically, like yes, I believe that Christ is the one who comes to save you. But when it comes to your actual life, the only one who's looking out for you is you, man. And evangelicalism does this prolonged adolescence thing, particularly in the seminary environment, where you got dudes in their 30s, and no shade to anybody working in the food industry. I've done it for many years myself. But you got dudes in their 30s who are still trying to get a freaking bachelor's degree and work at Chick-fil-A, man. What something's wrong here. Something's wrong.
yeah. Woo. So we're gonna have to charge money for this one. Like I'm gonna tell you, I don't know if they're ready for that. But yeah, dude. I mean, Yeah, I couldn't imagine. And that was, I mean, that was one of my fears. It was just like, am I going to be that person?
Yeah.
What if I get married and I got to go to undergrad, or, I convince myself to do a master's, and then you're one of these people here for like 15 years when you weren't supposed to be here that long. And,
Right.
your life just goes by.
I
And
also think, not to sound too cynical, but I think that's by design. When I don't know how it was when you started, but you being a year before me, I don't think it was that much different. From what I remember, our degree program continuously changed. So the
yeah.
requirements for the degree changed and the name of the degree changed as we progressed.
Mm-hmm.
And we have real advisors who would sit down with us and help us plan how we're going to graduate in time. A lot of the times it was just, you got to go find your own person, and they don't know what the heck they're talking about. I remember being in a room with a professor who I told, look, I got to graduate in 4 years. My parents are willing to help me for 4 years. My parents said they were willing to help me for 4 years, but
Yeah.
that's all I can do. If I don't get it in 4 years, I can't even go here anymore at this point, because it's not like I had money myself at that point. So, and he looked at me and laughed. He's like, look, you're going to have to get special approval from the president. Like, he had no idea what he was talking about.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Cause I also have a lot of memories of like, okay, I need this class. I need these 2 classes, and I get them, and they're just like, okay, are you going to offer this class soon? And it's just, oh shit, we got to do that.
Yeah.
And I gotta go to registrar. Like, I have to jump up and down and find
I
people.
forgot about that. We used to have late nights where we would all stay up and be like, we have to get this course. We got to bounce on it you
Or, you had to like vote for it, or like, guys,
Yeah.
like, you have to sign up for this damn class because they're not going to offer for 3 years. And it's my junior year, and I can't be here for 7 years.
Right.
And it was like tears in your eyes conversation. I'm like, yo, I got to find 6 people to take this niche class. And yeah, dude, it was a bunch of, oh my God. Yeah. I remember just the stress of that kind of thing. But Tyler, I want, when I hit you up, you said you wanted to tell a story.
Oh my goodness gracious.
And people who are going to come on this podcast, I believe each of them have a chunk of some kind of story that they're not supposed to know.
Oh boy.
I really believe they know a little too much of something.
Yeah.
So I want to hear whatever your chunk looks like.
All right, I gotta prepare myself for this one. Just give me a second.
Oh my God.
Let me just say one thing too. Shout out to Father Tim Kwan and Uncle Ev Kwan. All right. Basically, my junior year of school, I was kind of at that jaded point, and I was ready to just kind of like, my whole mentality was, yeah, I'm still a Christian, but I really have a problem with the way that things are done here. And I'm just going to try my best to have as much fun as I could. So we would pull pranks all the time, right?
Okay.
How I dealt with a lot of my aggression and anger towards the system was we would just pull pranks. Do you remember when at Flaherty Apartments, they were building that road that goes through from like one side of town to the other?
Yeah.
Okay, so they had like a construction crew. And do you remember in the middle of Flaherty was a trash can where you could go take all your stuff? Or like a few trash, right? So.
Oh no, I clearly remember.
So in those trash bins, sometimes people would leave like a television or something right by it, So what we would do is we would take the television, put it in the back of the car, and then we'd take it to where that construction crew was, and we'd break the TV, right?
Okay.
I mean, I was just aggressive, had a lot of aggressive energy, whatever. And then like they went and they picked the television that we broke up with a backhoe and put it to the side. And then we went the next week, grabbed another TV, put it on the back, broke another one, left it there. And we just did stupid stuff like that. We would go take fireworks, and we'd pop them off behind Flaherty and scare the shit out of people and stuff. So we just did fun stuff like that. Like I had a lot of anger, but I was channeling it through pranks.
Yeah, like normal stuff.
Yeah, and the other thing too, we were just kids. We were just trying to have a good time. So basically, a friend of mine who is actually in full-time ministry, Timothy, Timothy was a senior and was about to graduate. I can't get this thing lit. Hold on. Cool. He was a senior, and we had like one more week to spend with one another because he was about to move. So he was going to graduate the following week, and I was like, look, we need to have like one last big bang. Like, let's have us a good time. So, do you remember the I am going signs?
Yeah.
So, one of the big things at Southeastern was they would have a hashtag I am going sign with the school's logo. And then you would just write whatever it was that your career was. Some people would say, like, I'm going to be a missionary. I am going to spread the gospel in Zambia. I am going, whatever. So basically, what we did was Timothy had this idea that he wanted to write on the sign, I am going to administer the Lord's body and blood and baptize babies, which is what Lutherans believe in, right? Which is contrary to Baptist doctrine, right? So what we did was we went and he bought his priestly collar at Lifeway that week because he was about to go and start serving. And basically what happened was we went and I called someone who worked in the office and I said, hey, how can we get one of these signs? We want to take a photo with the I am going picture. They said, oh, it's in the missions building. It's in such and such office. So what happened was we went to go get the sign, and we stopped at a friend's house and we got a baby doll, right?
Yeah.
So what we did was we took the baby doll, the I am going sign, and we pretended to baptize the baby in the fountain in front of the chapel. So in front of the Baptist chapel, we're pretending to baptize a baby in front of the church, in front of the institution that doesn't believe in baptizing babies, right? So the sign read, I'm going to administer the Lord's body and blood. We had a heck of a time. We posted the picture. There were professors. They thought it was so hilarious.
I remember seeing the picture.
Yeah, they were messaging Timothy. They were, oh, this is such a good laugh. Like, God bless you on your future endeavors. Like, they were stoked on it, right? So I'm sitting in a line at Chick-fil-A at 9 o'clock that night. Maybe 3 or 4 hours had gone by. It was like quite some time. So I'm sitting in the car, and I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, but it was a North Carolina number, so I answered it. And it's the dean of the college, and who's no longer there. The dean of the college, and he's pissed. He's on the other line, and he says, hey, this is such and such. I wanted to know about your little stunt that you pulled. And I said, I'm sorry? Yeah, I want to know about your little stunt that you pulled. Because things aren't looking so good for you and your friend. Who's this Timothy guy? Oh, yeah, and by the way, I need you to stand by the phone, and I need you to take you to take the photo down. This dude's threatening me. I need you to take the photo down, and we will be calling you first thing in the morning. Be up by 7 o'clock and wait to answer your phone because our lawyers are preparing to sue you. And I'm like, I'm sorry? He said, you need to take the photo down. I said, yes, sir. So I said, he said, call me when because we were using like 3G, 4G, whatever. So I couldn't talk to him on the phone and use like my dad at the same time.
Yeah.
So he's like, do you have a problem taking the photo down? I said, no, I'll take the photo down. So I complied. So I take the photo down, and he says, call me back as soon as you do it. So I take the photo down. I call him back, and he says, look, what you did was heinous.
Oh,
and God. It could cost Southeastern squillions of dollars. He said, we are we are an independent school. We are an independent school. And if you put out there that we're a school that believes in a doctrine that's contrary to our teaching, we have independent donors who could stop giving us to the tune of right. And first of all, I mean, so I bought a publishing house this year to copyright my band's music. Let me just go ahead and say, legally, there's not really much you could do to us because you can't copyright a hashtag.
Yeah.
As far as I know, you can't copyright a hashtag. Second of all, anybody can go on Instagram and type in, I am going to go to your mom's house, whatever. And like anybody can do that, right? And then the other thing is these people pass around the stickers like it's nothing. They're giving them out to kids. They're giving out to kids with skateboards on the street. You don't know what a kid's going to do with that. I am going, who knows, right? So I honestly, at this point I was really nervous because I was thinking this dude skipped over all of the sort of like disciplinary things and is going straight to like, we are going to sue you. We're calling, and this is a school that's all about when someone sins against your brother, you reconcile. So all this, which I knew all that was junk, but now I'm like, oh, now we're seeing like what this is really about. So anyway, so basically, I wait by the phone the next morning. I couldn't sleep. I was worried, man. Because in my head, I'm not worried about the school suing me. I could care less. I could honestly care less about the school at that point.
Mm-hmm.
My whole thing was, I got one more year to go. I'm trying to graduate, and Timothy here is graduating next week. So I hope nothing like happens to screw that up for him. And I kind of have worked towards this. I'm ready to be done with this part of my life. But like, this could seriously this could be a damper on what I'm trying to do, you know? So, which was just trying to graduate. So anyway, so I wait by the phone, 7:00, he calls and he says, we thought about the situation more last night. And I want to know how you got that sign. And I was like, well,
they're just passing them out. Everyone I knew had one.
Well, yeah, the stickers, but this was
the big one. Yeah. Like everyone I knew was just like, hey, can I get one? The same way as you guys did.
Right. So what happened was, how we actually got the sign was, we walked into the missions building and the janitor was in the room.
Yeah.
Janitor was in the room, and Natalie, who worked in the office, told us where it was.
Yeah.
So we just went in there and grabbed it. So he says, well, what time did you take that photo? And I was like, 6, 7 o'clock. He said, well, the office is closed by that hour, so you broke and entered. And I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, no, we didn't break and enter. We just went in and got the sign. He's like, no, the office is closed at 6 o'clock. You broke and entered. I was like, okay, whatever. So he said, our lawyers didn't find any like legit reason to sue you, which I think was all just a threat at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But he says, our lawyers didn't have any like way to sue you, but you've got to go meet with head of campus security. So Timothy and I go and we meet with the head of campus security the next morning or whatever. Keep in mind, this is the end of the semester. Like, I'm already stressed out from exams. I'm already like burnt out. I'm ready to go back to South Carolina for a couple months so that I can shed all the crap and just kind of, try and like refresh myself and hit senior year real hard and be done,
Mm-hmm.
So we go talk to security, the security dude, and we go in the office and he's like, hey, you the kids that pulled the stunt? And we're like, yeah. He says, you realize that breaking and entering is like a class 2 felony, whatever, in North Carolina. And we're like, but we didn't break and enter. So he's like questioning us, interrogating us, right? And Timothy finally lets it loose that, hey, actually, we walked in the building, it wasn't locked, and the janitor was in there the whole time. And what we did was we took the pictures and then took the sign. We didn't even erase the sign because I didn't feel like we had anything to hide. We didn't erase the sign. And then we put it back in the office. And so Jamie, I don't care. Jamie calls me. I don't care. Jamie calls me and he says, you do realize that not only did you break and enter, this was before we went to go meet with campus security. He says, not only did you break and enter and you misused the sign, but there's thousands and thousands of dollars in that safe there. And if we find a single dime missing, then it's your ass, right? So, okay. So we made all these threats. We go meet with the dude, security dude. He's trying to get information out of us. And then we told him, look, we just walked in. Basically, his face went from being pissed and like, we got these kids, to like, oh, crap. Like, his whole demeanor changed when Tim told him, nah, dude, we literally walked in, said, what's up to the janitor, put the sign back and walked out. And dude, the whole like scenario changed after that. So
because he realized he was in the wrong because he didn't lock it up.
You got it right. So we're in the dark for a couple days. So that was Saturday morning. Sunday, don't hear anything. Monday, don't hear anything. And I took my final exam and I'm walking back to my car and I run into Jamie and he's on the cell phone. He comes up to me and he's still on the cell phone. He says, hey, I got to go. I got to talk to this guy real quick. He puts his arm around me and he goes, what you did was dumb. He's like, just don't do it again, man. It's okay. So I was like, all right. So you mean to tell me you were like 2 nights ago, you were telling me you were going to sue me. Then you were trying to like accuse me of committing a felony. And you're also saying that I misused, school's logo or whatever. So the trail goes cold for a few days, and I get an email, and it's from another disciplinary figure there named Seth. And Seth says, hey, I want to meet with you guys individually. So I go and meet with the guy, and we sit down, and he tells me a story about when he's a teenager, and they were riding around a neighborhood with no seatbelts on, and they were like on top of a car or something to that effect, and someone fell off. And so our whole like legal dispute became like, oh, it was just a prank, ha ha ha, right? So
now, but what are you thinking? Because now it just seems like they're just patronizing you. Like,
well, what I had given it a lot of thought. My whole thing is actually we could have hit them with a lawsuit for how they treated us. So we could have bounced right back and been like, well, you were treating us like hardened criminals for a little joke that we did. That actually, at the end of the day, the reason you're pissed is not because we went in and got a sign, because we busted your balls online.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah, it's that, and then security was incompetent, and now it makes you guys look bad.
Also, there might have been some sort of discriminatory like thing they might have thought we might have played where it was like you singled out the guys with different theology, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's like grounds for that in a private school, but I mean, there's certainly like stuff that was going through their head, So anyway, basically that was like the gist of like the story really. But the funniest thing to me is, and I'm not able to actually prove this is just from memory and one person's testimony. There's this guy who hit us up, a friend of mine at the time, Ryan, hit me up and he said, hey, I heard about the stunt you guys pulled. This was a couple hours after the event, I think before Jamie had called me. And he said, there's a group on Facebook, a forum, a blog, something of ex-Southeastern students who were jaded with the school and all had funny stories to tell. So there was a community online.
Oh, what?
And somehow or another, our little stunt had within a couple hours had made it to this group, which I'm really like stoked on. Again, I can't prove it, but there's only one guy who was like, hey, I saw this in a group of jaded Southeastern students. They thought it was hilarious. And I think he was informing them on what was going on as the weekend progressed. And he said that there was a person in that group who said that one time they had taken a shit on Danny Aiken's Cadillac.
Oh, whoa.
And now every time they go to a job, this is a person in their like well into their adult life.
Yeah.
Now every time they go for a job interview or apply for a different school or whatever they're doing, they had to explain what it was that they did.
Oh,
and
no.
like that issue comes up every time they're in an interview. I think that's hilarious. But yeah, somehow or another we had gone Southeastern viral and ended up in this group, and everybody thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, it's crazy how, like you said, like faculty and people were just like, yo, that's so funny. Bless you guys. And then from the very top, it's like this power play.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing of like, I had circumstances where I saw that in effect of just like intimidation, and it just turns into nothing.
Right.
And you're like, okay, that's great.
Now, I never had it as bad as you. I never got called, other than this stunt, I never got called into the office to ask about my personal life. So that was good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, any kind of rumor, any kind of, I don't know. It's just like it just looks like you're doing not the best. And so you get called, you get an email. Hey, can I talk to you? I heard you were skipping church on Sunday. I'm like, okay, great. Awesome. Dude. Well, Tyler, I think I love that story. I'm glad this was the place that you told it.
I'm so glad. I've been looking for years of a creative way to tell it, and honestly, a podcast from somebody who was in the in crowd is like the perfect way to do it. So I really appreciate that.
God, and dude. And it's like I remember seeing the picture. I'm like, yo, that's so fucking funny. I had no idea that you got that much blowback from it.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. After that, I was pulled into Jamie's office, and he said, "Look, this goes on a permanent file in here, and it will always be in here. I just want you to know, in case you decide to pull another stunt, this you gotten away with it for now, but this could be used against you if you did another stunt." And I'm like, "Wait a second, you're telling me you're telling me at the same school that they can't find Paige Patterson's files on telling women to go back to their abused husbands? You're telling me they can't find the files on that, but they can inform on me all day long about my little stunt that I pulled." It's ridiculous, man.
Oh my god. I feel like, yeah. I mean, only us, see and go through that. Oh my god. But dude, I wanna wrap up with a question.
Sure.
I think it's gonna be my signature question. People come on. Going back, if you go back in time to Tyler at 18, registering for Southeastern, knowing what was about to happen, what would you tell that version of yourself, your younger self?
Ooh, I would say number one, don't believe the hype. A lot of this is just hype. A lot of these people end up leaving ministry. They end up having some sort of chaotic life. I would tell myself, you don't want to be like any of these people. Maybe there's a few. I'm not trying to be too overly cynical, but I would also say, hey, it's okay for you to ask questions, man. It's okay for you to be an individual, and it's okay for you to realize that Christianity is a lot broader than the context that you grew up in and the context that this school perpetuates. And I would also tell myself, hey, go ahead and start working on your dreams, and don't put it to the side for some pseudo spiritual reason or to appease anybody around you. That's what I would say.
Mm. Damn, dude. Yeah, I hope people who listen to this just really, really consider the stuff that you said, because I mean, it's really powerful. Like, if you're ready to hear it, it's just like that stuff you're saying is just so powerful to get a handle on. But dude, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Second leap. I'm glad you're doing your own second leap, getting to your own self. And real quick before you leave, what are you up to now in South Carolina?
I am basically working on my band going on tour. I play in a band called Blissful Thoughts. We just put a record out called The Human Element at the beginning of this year, and things were really going good for us. And then COVID hit, and things have kind of obviously slowed down for the rest of, for me and for everybody else. So what I'm doing is right now I have a nice city job where I read and replace water meters, and I'm doing that for maybe a year more until we either pick up everything and go live in a van and go tour, or find a city that's got a thriving music scene where I can play 5 nights a week and pay my bills,
Nice. All right, dude. Bless you. I mean, I hope everything comes together for you and your band. Where can people find you on Instagram?
You can find me at One Stoking Bro.
Oh, nice. All right. And you can find me at Lakai Vincent. And Tyler, I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, brother. It was a good time.
Oh, awesome.